Hey everyone, it's Simone Watson, and today I want to talk about the white default in fiction. The ironic thing about the white default in fiction is that if you don't know what the white default is, it's because of the white default. It's kind of like the Matrix. It's like you have to know what it is in order to fight against it, right? But if you don't know what it is, you're fine with it. It's like that basically. So today I was reading a Goodreads synopsis for a book, and I hesitate to tell you the name of the book because I don't blame the author for this at all, and the author is a person of color, and I don't want to discourage anyone from supporting this book because, like, hey, it might be a great book. You know, I don't blame the author, but here's the thing. The synopsis of this book, it was talking about two married couples, and let's call one of the couples person A and person B, and then we're gonna call the other couple person X and person Y. So what happened was this synopsis basically said person A and person B go to this place and they do some stuff, and then a black couple, person X and person Y, show up and they talk about this and that and this. And I'm like, okay, let's think about this for a second. Did the synopsis tell us the race of person A and person B? No. So essentially we are left with this impression that this one couple is a couple and this other couple is a black couple. This is the essence of the white default. The idea that you don't need to state that white people are white, but you need to state that people of color are people of color. That's one of the, I guess, let's say, results of the white default. That you feel the need to state that the people of color are people of color and not state that the white people are white. This assumes a neutrality of whiteness. It assumes that unless you say otherwise, people are white. Like, white is just neutral. White is just the net zero state, or I don't know if net zero is what we're looking, but like just white people are just people. And black people are black people, or, you know, people of color are people of color, but white people are just people. This is a problem. And so the reason why we have the white default, well, we could explain the reason why we have the white default in a few ways. The simplest way is probably racism. We have the white default because of racism. We have the white default because of the general idea that if you're not white, you're other, you're different. Sometimes this is even framed as a positive thing. You're exotic because you're not white. Let me tell you something. People of color, I have never heard a person of color say that they like being called exotic. People don't like being called exotic. Generally, people don't like being called exotic because of their skin color, because it's othering. It's othering. It's the other. You're calling them the other people. I mean, they're different, but it's like different from what? What makes us think that white equals normal? Racism, okay? But the thing about racism is that racism is insidious, and it sometimes the people that are participating in a racist phenomenon are not participating in it on purpose. And so sometimes the reflex can be to get defensive. If someone says, like, you did something racist or you participated in something that was racist, you might be like, you know. But listen. The white default is a problem. As a black person growing up, okay, I saw white people on television and in movies all the time, okay? And this is where, when you analyze race in media, there are so many topics that are like all together. They're all like tangled up together, in the sense of like tokenism, right? Tokenism is the wrong way to do diversity, so to speak. Tokenism is when you say, hey, there are all these white characters on this show, let's just add a black character, and then let's have that black character represent black people as a whole. Like that's tokenism. When the character is not a character, they are a token, they are a symbol. Anybody seen One Tree Hill? Okay, anyone notice that there were like 2 black dudes on that show and one of them never ever talked, and the other one, every time he talked, he was saying something that was like stereotypically what white people think black people say. See, that's tokenism. That's tokenism. But anyway, okay. So the white default assumes that people are white unless stated otherwise. I'm just giving you examples because, and I'm giving you kind of ways that this plays out. The ironic thing about the white default, you may call this a part of the white default or you may call it separate. The ironic thing is that there is this assumption that the audience is white also. And so if someone writes a book about a black person and, you know, someone else, sometimes publishing professionals, is like, I don't know if readers will find this character relatable. Well, there are a lot of reasons a character might not be found relatable, but if you think that readers can't relate to a character who's a person of color, it's probably because you assume that the readers are white. Readers are not necessarily white. So the thing here, and I was talking to some other writers about this recently, what connects to this, okay, the white default, what connects to that is double consciousness. Double consciousness is a term that was coined by W.E.B. Du Bois, who was this really great writer. He wrote The Souls of Black Folks. He wrote about blackness, and he wrote about the moment in his life when he first realized that people hated him for being black. Like just the first time that happened. And he was maybe 8 years old, I think. And he has talked about double consciousness. Double consciousness is the ability to move through the world as if there are 2 different worlds, so to speak. And saying that makes me think of the show A Different World, which is a perfect example. So double consciousness, as it applies to black people, I would think that all people of color in like societies in which whiteness is centered, I would think that all people of color would experience some form of this, but I can speak to it from the perspective of a black person. So I'm just gonna talk about black people right now, right? But it's, as a black person, knowing that there's a way that you relate to other black people, and there's like a culture, there's a way to exist and kind of like survive in that space, and then there's a way to survive or exist in spaces dominated by the culture that is centered in your society. So for black Americans, that would be spaces dominated by white people. So that would mean that I know how to exist around my family or like other black people when I'm in a space full of black people. I understand that world. Let me say it like that. Like I have an understanding of that world, but I also have an understanding of the larger world of the United States. And because I have seen both and understand both, I know that sometimes in the general American space, or a lot of times in that space, I know that people like myself are considered the other. And I know we're considered the other because I have switched and can switch between the space where I'm considered the other and the space where I am not. And so black people have to develop this double consciousness, even if we live in a place where we're surrounded by black people all the time. In general, as the media has such an influence on us, if all we see in the media is white people, or we occasionally see black people, or we occasionally see non-black people of color, but if the media as a whole treats black people as the other, then we do come to that place. We come to an understanding of double consciousness. We come to have double consciousness. Now, because of that, let me say, we learn to relate to characters on a level, even if they're not black. Or I can at least say that for myself. Like, there are characters that I love, there are characters I relate to that are not black. And I mean, I'm not the only one who does this. There are a ton of black people who are fans of Star Wars or fans of all of these different stories. Well, yes, there is at least one black character in two black characters in Star Wars, but I'm saying like all of these things that are, you know, that are centering white people, and you have fans who are people of color. Why? Because we've seen things that center white people, and we've learned to relate to characters on other levels. We've learned to relate to them for different reasons. We did not have to learn, like, we didn't have to like consciously teach ourselves to understand that white people are humans. Like, there was never the question posed to us of whether white people are people, or whether white people are, you know, worthwhile, so to speak. I mean, let me rephrase this. There was never a question posed to us of whether white people's skin color makes them inferior to anyone else, you know? So they're never like, we never had to like, or had the opportunity or had the reason to say something like, oh, I don't see you as a white person, I just see you as a person. Like, we never had to do that. There was no reason for us to do that. That was never called into question. White people's personhood was not called into question in white dominated societies, nor was it, in my experience, nor was it called into question in the spaces that are like predominantly composed of black people. Like, we didn't just go like, oh, are white people people? Like, that never was the thing. That wasn't the thing. And so when you see white people saying things like, I don't see you as a black person, like, I just see you as a person, it doesn't make any sense to us, because we always have seen ourselves as people, and we always have seen ourselves as black people, and we've always seen white people as white people. Why? Because that's the society into which we were born. That's the society into which we grew up. That is how we survive. We survive by understanding and navigating that world. And I feel like there's so much stuff that if you were white, you might have taken for granted. And this is not like an accusation toward you, but there are certain things that you may have taken for granted as universal, or, you know, things that seem to be true of everyone's experience that are not universal. There are things that are specific to white people that white people just don't know are specific to white people. And so that one of those things is the idea that, oh, we couldn't relate to this character because this character is a different race from us. If you don't understand, like, for black people, that's not, for the, let me say it this way. As a black person, there's like more than one level of relatability. I read Anne of Green Gables when I was 8 years old, okay? Do y'all know there's, as far as I can tell, I read 8 books of Anne of Green Gables. There were 0 people of color. Did I keep reading it? Yes. I enjoyed it. I related to Anne on a certain level. I also felt a little weird because it was like, oh, why are people like me not in these stories? But it was something that was in the back of my mind, where it was like, I knew that like the stuff that I was enjoying wasn't really for me, wasn't made with people like me in mind. So it was like, I knew that, and it was sad, but I also enjoyed that work of art at the same time. So there was kind of that dissonance there, basically. And so as I got older and I began to really understand these things and understand that, like, man, like, it kind of stinks that like you don't see people of color in the media very much, you know? And then when I was able to like read that, like, oh my gosh, Yes, I know this is becoming a longer topic, but that's because there's so much to say on this issue. When I read the book Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison in like senior year of high school, I'm telling you, I never like connected with a character on that same level, because it's about a black man who feels invisible. I never connected with a character on that level of like being black and like all of those things that you couldn't explain, but this writer managed to put them in such a way, to like express them in such a way that was like, wow, you know? And so the reason why I'm saying that is because I love that story. That story helped me a lot. Also Jason Reynolds, also Tiffany D. Jackson. These authors who write about black people, and I feel seen and understood, you know, on a level that's just priceless when I read those things. So I don't want you to think that I'm saying that because I'm saying, oh, a lot of black people can relate to white characters. I don't want you to think that I'm saying, so we don't need stories that are about black people, or so we don't need stories that are about people of color or by people of color. No, 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 no. We still need this diversity. What I'm saying is, if people of color are able to relate to characters who are not the same race as them, white people can do the same thing. White people can relate to characters who are people of color, but in order for them to do that, they have to put aside this privilege, because see, they never had to do that. They never had to stretch relatability beyond the bounds of race. They generally, okay, let me say, they generally never had to see like the main characters of the stories being a different race from them. So they kind of took that for granted. You know what I'm saying? A lot of white people kind of took that for granted. And so this kind of circles back, okay, to taking things for granted. The assumption that characters are white, or the assumption that relatability and like being an everyday person, being a regular person, being an upstanding person, blah, 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 that those qualities are associated with whiteness. I see this all the time, okay? I see this idea all the time, that being a regular person and being a white person are like considered to be synonymous. Like it doesn't make sense. And a lot of white people are not aware of this. They're not aware that this whole huge thing exists, and that by not understanding it and choosing to dismantle it, they are allowing it to continue. Okay? And so all that to say, don't describe your white characters as just people and describe your people of color as people of color. Like, it is so kind of dehumanizing to be like, this is a person and this is a black person. Like, it's so dehumanizing. Like, how do you think black people fit? Like, what the heck, man? You know, yeah. So I was really mad. I feel like I'm gonna have to make a part 2 to this video, because there's just so much. It's such a broad thing. Okay. Oh, the other thing, coding. Okay. I'm not gonna talk too much about coding, but if you think you should imply that your characters are people of color, but then you just never ever say anyone's race, be they white or be they any other race, that's not good, okay? It's not good to be like, let me just give this character an ethnic sounding name, because I've seen somewhere where some author gave that advice, like, and that's very bad advice. That is very bad advice. That the way to add diversity to your story is just give some of your characters ethnic sounding names and just kind of keep it stepping. Just otherwise, just don't change anything. No, okay, that's no. That's not a good way to add diversity. That's not even okay. Calm, Simone. So yeah, this is just basically it. It's just it's the idea that some white writers will be like, oh, you know, I'm scared. I don't want to get blamed. I don't want to get blamed because of tokenism, or because I accidentally stereotyped somebody, or I accidentally did this and that. And so therefore I'm just not going to state any character's race. No, because here's the thing. When you don't state any character's race, you're reinforcing the white default, because you're not dismantling the white default, because the white default exists and the white default perpetuates itself. So if you don't state any characters' races, then a lot of your readers are going to assume that your characters are white. Yeah, so that's not, I mean, you got characters who it's been stated that they aren't white. You know, you got characters like, I hate to bring up Rue from the Hunger Games, because that is, but you got characters like Rue. The book said she was black, okay? For people to get mad that she was black and then act like they weren't being racist, come on now. So, yeah, I know I keep trying to close out this video, but it's just like, I just feel very strongly about this. The best thing we can do right now is describe all of our characters' skin colors. Do you have to specifically say their race? You have to, I mean, you could just say that their skin is brown, or that their skin is white, or that they, I mean, y'all are writers, so like, you can get creative, but like, don't take, and I don't want to get upset about this, but don't take the easy way out, okay? Don't take the easy way out. Please understand that your audience is not 100% made up of white people. And when you do things like this, when you do things like, oh, this is a person and this is a black person, like, you're hurting people, you're hurting your audience. And I don't know if I mentioned this. I don't blame the author here. I don't think that the author wrote this blurb. I think somebody at the publishing house wrote this blurb. And that's, I mean, we need people of color to work at publishing houses also. So we need diversity at all levels of the industry, because you need somebody to catch certain stuff. Like, certain stuff is like, how did nobody understand? How did nobody catch that this was a problem? But and we also need diversity in publishing for a myriad of reasons. Okay, so that's just one reason. That's not even like the main like reason. So thank y'all so much for watching. Yeah, I had a lot of thoughts on this, so I really would like to hear your thoughts below. I'll see you in my next video.